My name is Hellen. Welcome to Soulfood with Hellen, where we come together to remind one another that regardless of where you are on your journey, what has happened in the past, what you are going through right now, you are not alone. This is a safe, non-judgmental space where we invite some of the influential trailblazers and game-changing thinkers in the world so they empower us with wisdom as we explore on the significance of mental, emotional, psychological wellness as it relates to spirituality, mindset, and inner healing. Today, I have a very special guest, a man I deeply respect and admire, a fountain of wisdom. He is an international television journalist, news producer, documentary filmmaker, and New York Times Zimbabwean foreign correspondent. He did a powerful and enlightening documentary on mental health called State of Mind. If you haven't watched it, I would advise you to check it out on Facebook. His name is Hopewell. Welcome to Soulfood with Hellen, and thank you for gracing us and blessing us with your presence. What an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having me on the program, Helen. It's an honor to be on the program.
I was listening to one of the shows by Oprah Winfrey, and she was interviewing one of her guests, and she posed this question: what are two most important issues affecting the world right now? And the guest mentioned mental health and climate change. Mental health and climate change, and I think, let me ask you this question: is the world ready for the new pandemic? Because for me, I consider mental health a new pandemic that no one is paying attention, or I can say a few people are paying attention to it. Do you share the same sentiments?
Well, mental health is one of the most important elements in the life of a human being, because the most important part of the body is the brain. It helps you to function, it helps you to make decisions, and it helps you to interact with society. And when it fails to work properly, it means your whole well-being is not able to interact with society properly. Now, if you look at mental health in Zimbabwe, because linked to it. So if you look at the issue of economics and politics today, they have contributed immensely to the suffering of mental health of many of our citizens. A lot of young people are turning to drugs, and that drug pandemic is actually a mental health pandemic. A lot of people have failed to understand that there's a direct link between drug addiction and mental health. And a lot of our people are turning to drugs because of hopelessness. There are no jobs. There's nothing else that they can do. If they try to express themselves, they are beaten to pulp or thrown into prison. So they end up taking drugs. They end up taking alcohol in measures that are not supposed to be consumed by a normal human being. So mental health indeed is a very important global issue, but more so in Zimbabwe, in a country where 95% of our potential job workforce is not at work. And most of these are youths who are suffering. Most youths are leaving universities, they're leaving polytechnics, they're leaving colleges, they're even leaving high school, and they're not getting any jobs. You find people 35, they've never worked, they've never owned a ATM card, a bank card. And that in itself is one of the clearest elements of why we have a serious mental health issue that we need to address as citizens. Zimbabwe is number 13 in terms of suicide globally, worldwide. We're at number 13. That's a serious tragedy in a world with hundreds of countries. We are in the top 15. In 2018 alone, over 1,730 Zimbabweans killed themselves. Most of these are products of economic misery. They look around themselves and they find that there's no salvation, there's no one to help them. And because of that, they end up taking their own lives. And a lot of people have never understood that when people take their own lives, when people commit suicide, it is part of mental health. It is part of mental illness. It means that somebody has been cornered by life, by society, and they are not able to respond accordingly to those pressures that are thrown at them. And eventually they give up and they commit suicide. So it's very serious, because the #1 killer of youth in Zimbabwe, according to statistics that were released by Professor Dixon Spanda of the Friendship Bench, and who's one of the leading African psychiatrists and is Zimbabwean, are to the effect that the #1 killer for youths in Zimbabwe is suicide, and that's tragic.
Yeah, it's a sad situation, and I love that you mentioned that the youths may end up doing drugs, alcohol, and engaging on all those things that are not acceptable in the society. And I feel like we are not really paying attention to the root problem, which is mental health. And people end up blaming it all on drugs and alcohol, saying maybe the youth irresponsible, but you really mentioned some of the critical key issues that are really the source and the root cause of this issue. And I also feel like mental health is often misunderstood in our society, and everyone has got different opinion and the different ways in which they interpret what mental health is all about. But I actually feel that maybe mental health should be treated as a medical condition. I watched your documentary, and it's really enlightening and powerful, and it really got me so emotional to realize that these things are real. I don't know what really inspired you to make that documentary.
I made the documentary film because I realized that mental health is a serious issue in Zimbabwe, but I also realized that mental health is something that people are afraid to talk about. People don't engage openly about their mental health status. Every human being suffers some kind of mental illness in their lifetime, and people must understand that it's important to take care of yourself. To as what people say, you must take good care of yourself. You must make sure that you're looking after yourself, you're looking after your soul. And I realized that a lot of the people that were struggling with mental illness were struggling with mental health, were struggling with depression, drug addictions, were afraid of the stigma that comes with mental health. So I want to tell you that in 2014, when my brother was struggling with the terminal illness, osteosarcoma, which was cancer, I suffered from anxiety. And I did not realize that I was actually suffering from anxiety. And I went to doctors about many doctors in Zimbabwe. The diagnosis was not done properly. I spent over $6,000 in 2014 trying to get treatment. Was admitted into Avenues Hospital for 3 days until I was given one tablet by a nurse who said, "I'm going to give you this since you're saying you're struggling to find some sleep." And when I was given that tablet, which is called lorazepam, I suddenly found myself feeling better, feeling okay. And when I explained to these nurses and to the doctor the following morning that I was now feeling fine, and that's when we realized that I was actually going through a mental health crisis because I was stressed by the terminal illness that was about to take my brother, who subsequently died in 2014 in September. And it's something that I talk about openly because it's something that happens to every one of us at some point in our lifetime. We get pressures of life thrown at us, and we struggle to try and get the right combination to make sure that we can proceed with our lives normally. And because of those things, I realized that it was important to make a documentary film to show young people that you're not alone. There are a lot of young people that are struggling with drug addictions, and these drug addictions are driven by the social conditions in our society, the economic conditions where youth can't get jobs. If a young person has got a job and they're going to work, it's much easier for them to take control of their life because they've got what they need in their life. That is the economic means for survival. But if a young man is living with their parents and they stay with their parents up to when they're 30, they don't have money, they end up taking drugs as a way of escapism, trying to run away from those pressures of life. And when they do that, they end up addicted to these drugs and they lose control of their life. And as you rightly said, mental health is actually a medical condition. But people don't understand this. You see people stigmatizing each other, unopenga, anorwara, you and so forth. And that it's retrogressive because it does not help the person to get, in order for them to get better. So it's important for us as a society, as Zimbabweans, to understand that when you find that your friend, your relative, your work colleague is struggling with pressures of life, you should assist them, give them a hand for them to hold, and make sure that you become part of the solution for them to get better.
Wow, well said. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for being vulnerable enough to come out and share your story so that everyone who's going through this or who may experience it in the future will be able to relate and realize that this is not about having a problem or something wrong with you, but it's something that is normal, that we all experience as human beings at one point in our lives, like what you just mentioned. And I also believe that it is time that we need to come out of this shell as a society and stop being ignorant about this new pandemic. I consider it a pandemic because of the tragic consequences that we are seeing in the world right now in terms of suicide rates, like the statistics that you were mentioning. And I also observed here, I'm based in South Africa, and they say that there are 23 suicides every day in South Africa. And you can see that this is not an issue to play around with, and we need to pay attention to this, and we need to own that we are in a crisis that takes both of us, each other, to look out for each other, like what you just mentioned. So in terms of the rate of suicide, Hopewell, it's so shocking and disturbing. What intervention can we really start to look at from the ground, family level, society, or whatever? What can we do to try to reduce the impact of depression and suicide?
I think the most important thing for us to do is to understand that it's normal for human beings to sort of go through these sort of episodes, like depressive episodes. It's normal for human beings when they're facing hardships in life to go through situations where they suffer from anxiety. It is normal for human beings for them to need the help from society, from their friends, from their families, and from their medical professional when they suffer from this kind of problem. Mental health, it's an issue that has not been properly understood by Zimbabweans, because people think that someone is mentally ill because akaroiwa, because anima mepo and so forth. But mental health is actually a medical issue. You can suffer from mental health because you're having a bad marriage. You can suffer from mental health because you're a victim of verbal and physical abuse. You can suffer from mental health because you're living in a society which does not respect human rights and you're afraid to speak. And because you're bottling all those pressures inside you, you can suffer from mental health. So we need to start at a point where mental health is actually taught in primary school, where young kids are taught about mental health, where they, by the time they get to grade 7, they understand what depression is, they understand what anxiety is, they understand that when they see these symptoms in people that are around them, they know exactly what it is. At the moment, it's not the case. Like I explained to you earlier, I spent over $6,000 thinking that I was suffering from some kind of physical illness, and yet I was suffering from anxiety. It's only when I was given a lorazepam did I understand that I was actually suffering from a mental health problem, which was anxiety. And most of us suffer from these conditions and recover without needing to go to hospital, but not all of us are able to recover without needing that sort of assistance.
Yes, perfect. You just spoke something that is close to my heart, where you mentioned that we need to start educating this from, primary level, even primary level, so that they understand what is mental health and so that they understand what is depression. And I'm always resonating with that fact, and I would like to witness that happening in my country, in Africa at large. One of the most disturbing thing, like when I look at the context of our country, Zimbabwean situation, I do not know if there are any organization. You mentioned that one about Dr. Chibanda, the bench something aspect that is trying to intervene to combat this issue of mental health. I do not know, what advice would you give to people regarding that in Zimbabwe? Do we have any rehabilitation centers or anywhere where people can go and get help?
I think in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, we had rehabilitation centers which were able to assist in a very meaningful manner. But at the moment, we have the Friendship Bench, which is a brainchild of Professor Dixon Shibanda, who's one of the leading psychiatrists in Zimbabwe and on the continent. And we have other organizations that are bringing in some sort of interventions. But the problem is that the state is supposed to provide these rehabilitation centers, these mental health centers. But because we understand in Zimbabwe, the state is broken down. It's not able to assist in providing mental health solutions in a way that is sufficient for the citizens who are suffering from mental health problems. So for instance, according to the Mental Health Act, if you go to government hospitals, medication is supposed to be free. But when you go to these government hospitals, the medication is not actually there. So you end up with citizens who are suffering from mental health having to rely on their relatives to get medication. And some, because they come from poor families, most people in Zimbabwe now have been reduced to poverty, they are not able to get this medication and they relapse. And those are the people that you see that they got better at some point in time, but now they've relapsed and they've some of them, the mental health problems are very evident physically. They go into the streets. Some of them suffer in silence at home, especially those that suffer from depression. And the most depressing thing in our society is that most of the people who suffer from depression are women, postnatal depression. And a lot of men don't actually understand what it is, and they don't understand the symptoms of postnatal depression. They don't understand how it manifests itself. And because of that, a lot of women suffer in silence, and a lot of them, sadly, commit suicide because they can't cope. And because the people around them, they don't understand what's going around these women. And it comes back again to the failure by the state to provide institutions which are able to pick up these problems early on, institutions that are able to then deal with these problems, provide the medical solutions for women who are suffering from postnatal depression, or from men who are suffering from general depression or from anxiety or from drug problems. For those who have watched State of Mind, which is my film that I made on mental health in Zimbabwe, you see that there is a guy called Evans in the film, and there's a problem that he faces, that he doesn't have the proper instruments to assist him to get out of addiction. You see that when he's talking to his mother, there's a shouting match going on between him and his mother. You see that when the mother starts explaining what goes on when he's home, she comes back to the issue that these young men and women do not have jobs. And
Yes.
because of that, it triggers mental health problems, which manifest themselves through drug addiction. And some people just can't cope. They just sit quiet at home and anenge akunzi uyu ane problem uyu anonetsa uyu anongogara akanyarara, there's something wrong, anonetsa uyu, and they don't understand that somebody is actually going through a very painful episode of mental health, of mental illness, and that episode requires the proper attention, requires the proper medical intervention. And because the state is failing to provide these medical interventions, it's now left to families. Some go to so-called prophets. Most of them were fake. They lie to them. They tell them that they are going to be fine. Some are even made to stop taking their medication, which is a very serious tragedy taking place in our society. I filmed this. I have it on tape, and these pastors have got a serious, powerful influence over their flock, and they tell them that, oh no, these are demons, and that somebody's just having a mental illness problem, which can be treated if it's taken care of by doctors. But so we have different stratas of problems. We have a state that is failing to deliver on its obligations by providing rehabilitation centers, by providing mental health hospitals that are well equipped to deal with these problems. We have a society which stigmatizes mental health, where if I were to say I'm suffering from a mental health problem, most of the people that don't like me will start using that as a weapon, as a tool to taint me. They think they're tainting me, but they're actually trying to destroy me. So we need to deal with that aspect of stigma. We also need to deal with the situation of our economy. A lot of the mental health disorders would go away if the economy was fixed, because most of them are triggered by people who feel helpless, because they have no jobs, they have no money to look after themselves, men who are married but they can't provide for their families, and they end up wallowing their sorrows and engaged in escapism through drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, perfect. This is deep and profound, and thank you everyone who's tuning in today. I have with me Hopewell who's sharing the insights and wisdom in terms of mental health, the effects and the impacts, and how we can start taking steps to raise awareness on this important issue. You know what, Hope? One of the things that really touched my heart, why I started this show. I started this show in November last year. I come from Chivu, and there was a lady, I don't know if you heard about that story, who killed her 4 kids. She actually beheaded them. She's actually my neighbor, someone who's a few houses away from our family home. And it's something that really touched me deeply, like to think of it, that someone living in a community with people, to get to the extent that you behead one child, you go to the second, you go to the third, you go to the fourth. Zviri nyore kutaura kuti mweya wetsvina akagarwa ane ngozi. But I think as a society we should have compassion to try to understand the root issue. And I love that you mentioned the issue of Many people who are affected by mental health issues are women, and there is not enough that is being done on the ground. For a woman in rural area of Chivu who's going through such an emotional, depressive time, it means that she had tried all options, because the husband, I think it was the issue that the husband had cheated or something like that. She failed, which means the church failed to address, and she's not even aware that there is help that is available maybe at hospitals. I don't even know if there are psychologists at our general hospitals. It's one of the tragic things that we're experiencing in this century that we need to start waking up to and start talking about. And I'm not really sure what can be done, but how can we reach to those on the ground, like that rural woman? How do we start to connect? Because I think it's now an issue of us as a society to say, this is our problem. How can we take part without maybe trying to push it away? Because we are seeing and witnessing that the government is not doing anything in terms of this pandemic. What can we start to do on the grassroots level, on the ground, like the rural setup of chief women? How can we raise awareness to such kind of people?
I think the most important thing is for every citizen to understand that it is their responsibility to assist the next person to them when they are going through mental health problems. It is also a citizen's responsibility not to stigmatize people who are suffering from mental illness, mental health problems. It is also the responsibility of men to assist women when they are dealing with mental health problems, not necessarily directly on themselves, but I noticed when I was filming State of Mind, I spent 1.5 years filming it at Harare Hospital and at Parenyatwa Hospital. And all the occasions, all the people that I was following who were struggling with mental illness were in the film. Not a single occasion did I see a man coming with them to hospital. Not a single occasion did I see a man visiting them at the hospital. It was always the mothers, the wives, the sisters. It was never the fathers. It was never the brothers. It was never the husbands. So that in itself tells you that there's a tragic breakdown of understanding in our society where men think that it's not their responsibility to take care of relatives that are struggling with mental illness disorders. Evans, it was the mother in the film State of Mind. Evans was the mother, and then when Dr. Sibanda was struggling with bipolar, it was the wife, and then we had the musician, it was the mother again, and with Evans, the mother would sometimes alternate, and it would be the sister. So it's important for men to understand that since we claim to be the bedrock of our society, we should show that by actually behaving it, by not only claiming to be men of the house when we are failing to take care of the fundamental issues of our society. And one of the most urgent issues in our society today is mental health. It's not proper, it's not normal to have a society like Zimbabwe where the majority of young people who are dying in this society are dying through suicides. And suicides are driven by economic pressures of life, it's mental health, it's mental illness disorders. So it's important for us as men to understand that we have been letting down our women in this society. We need to step up. We need to make sure that when our brothers are not feeling well, we are also there to assist their wives or to assist our mothers. We are also there to assist our sisters. When when there's a member of society or there's a member of the family who's not feeling well, we should also step in to assist. And that way, it makes it much easier for society to be able to engage with the mental health pandemic, as you called it, that is affecting our country. And it is also important for citizens of Zimbabwe to understand that in order for people to be able to come out openly, you must not stigmatize mental illness. I suffered from anxiety. I know a lot of people who suffered from anxiety who came out, but I did so. I'm able to do so because I'm a prominent individual, not only in my society but internationally. So to say I'm suffering from anxiety does not prejudice me in any way. But to some other people to come out and say they've suffered from anxiety, it prejudices them because they are then insulted by members of their society. And yet every human being, every one of us is going to go through some kind of mental illness disorder in our lifetime. It could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be anything else. So it's important for us to understand that we should not stigmatize members of society or family members. That way it helps people to come out. It is also important for the citizens to demand their government to make sure that it discharges its obligations towards mental health. We have a society that is now subjected to mental health like never seen before, and yet the government is failing to do its job like never seen before as well. When my mother suffered from a mental illness disorder in the 80s, she was able to go and get treated at Harare Hospital. She would get all the medication, she would get all the support, psychologists were on hand. But today, if your mother suffers from mental health, or if you suffer from a mental illness disorder, you can go to Harare Hospital. Professor Shibanda can do the diagnosis properly, but perhaps the medication that is required to deal with that specific disorder that you're suffering from is not available at Professor Shibanda's disposal at Harare Hospital. So he ends up giving you a medical prescription, a drug prescription to go and buy private, and you don't have the money. Most of us do not have the money to buy these drugs. Most people in this country are going to bed on empty stomachs, let alone expect them that they would buy drugs for mental health. They're not able to do so.
Yeah. Wow, so deep and profound. Thank you so much for highlighting all those important factors. And I think also, like, the issue that you just highlighted of the stigma around mental health issue, I think it is something that is perpetuating this pandemic to the extent that people do not feel comfortable to come out to share because they are afraid that people will begin to look at them and judge them or criticize them, and all those factors that people begin to talk about and spread about you and vilify you for sharing about your pain. But I think it is time that we need to begin to speak and engage in conversations around mental health so that we are both educated and we become aware, like what you just mentioned, you have mentioned earlier on, that it doesn't mean that there is anything wrong with you and you are not alone. It's something that you are going to experience at one point in your life. And as for me, I'm also one of the people who struggled with mental health issues, with depression, anxiety, overthinking. And I think I shared with you this, telling you about my story. And, having people like you coming out and beginning to share, it's something that also inspired me to begin to share about my struggles with mental health issues, with depression, with suicidal, because I have been suicidal also at some point. So I think as a society, like what you have been emphasizing on, we need to hold space for one another and support one another and stop this thing of stigma, criticizing, and it will not save us well. Because of our time, I do not know if you have any words of wisdom that you want to leave our audience with, especially the youths of Zimbabwe.
I think to the youth of Zimbabwe, I would like to say that when you see one of your people, or your relative, or your friend, or your colleague, or your neighbor suffering from some kind of mental illness, please step in, assist them. ask them how you can help, show them compassion, show them that you are able to be there for them. Don't ridicule them, don't stigmatize them, because at some point you are also going to go through that kind of experience. Mental illness does not choose rich or poor. It affects everyone. There are wealthy people, there are CEOs, there are generals in the army, there are politicians who suffer from mental illness disorders, who suffer from mental health, who suffer from depression. So we all need to show each other love, to show each other compassion, and to be able to be there for each other. Go and also learn about mental health, read about it, spend some time doing meaningful things with your internet time, reading about these issues to understand them, understand depression, read about anxiety. You will actually realize that, oh my God, I've actually gone through this kind of process when you start reading about it and understanding it. Because a lot of people just say, oh my God, I'm depressed, but they don't understand what depression is. But they also don't understand that depression is something that any one of us can suffer from. It is something that can be managed properly if there's medical intervention. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. I've always said, young people, old people, people of my age, feel free to reach out, and I can point you towards the right person who will be able to assist you. I can point you towards the right institutions that are able to give you the medical help that you need, whether it's counseling, whether it's merely going on the friendship bench where you sit and you need someone to tell you that it's going to be fine, to hold your hand. Most women are in abusive relationships in Zimbabwe. They're beaten up, they're verbally abused. They don't have anyone to turn to, because sometimes the families of the husband, family members of the husband gang up against them, and they end up suffering from depression. Reach out to people that you trust, and talk to them about your situation, and hopefully they will help you. And anyone who has come to me, I've always pointed them towards the right direction. And Professor Dixon Chibanda of the Friendship Bench has always said to me, if there's anybody who needs help, they can go to the Friendship Bench. They are found in townships in Harare, and I think they are rolling them outside Harare. And he's always said, if you do not have money to go and see him at his private rooms, go to another hospital. When he's there, he will treat you. You get the same amount of attention that you would get even if you went to his rooms. So if you don't have money to go private, don't be embarrassed. Just go to another hospital, you get treatment. If you get medication prescriptions that you can't afford, reach out. We will see what we can do. I always try and make a plan for everyone who is in that situation, because, as I said at the beginning of the program, mental health is one of the most serious illnesses that one can suffer from. If I'm suffering from pain in my leg, it can be dealt with by painkillers. But when I lose my mind, I lose my ability to interact with society.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that you accepted my invitation to come here. I know you are always busy, but I'm truly humbled and grateful for this opportunity and all the wisdom that you have shared with us today. And to all our audience, I really appreciate having you here, and I hope you have learned from the wisdom that Hopewell was sharing today with us. And it's time for us to pay attention, raise awareness, and like what you were saying, to begin to educate ourselves in terms of mental health, so that we resolve this issue and stand by each other and support one another, and we can work with what we have. Considering the situation in our country, I believe that there is always help that is available, like what he was just mentioning, that everyone is welcome. If you're struggling with mental health issues, mental illness, reach out to him. He will refer you to the right people who will be able to assist and help you. And that's the idea of our show, to educate each other and remind each other that no matter where you are, what you are going through in life, you are not alone. Reach out to people who can help you, like what Popo is just is inviting everyone to reach out to him and get the assistance that you require. Thank you, Hopewell. We are blessed
Thank
to
you very
have you.
much. Thank you so much for having me on the program, and I wish you well.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. See you next time in our next